Hey, I'm Reverend Billy Price, born and raised CP. The CP Church is all that I've ever known. Now, growing up, I had a couple of family members that were homosexual that I knew of, and the family still invited and included them in our gatherings, as well as their partners. Our family didn't really view homosexuality as a bad thing, but it was different. And so I went through high school and entered college with that same general understanding that homosexuality wasn't bad or evil by nature. It was just different. And I guess I realized I grew up in a CP church that just didn't make a big deal about this kind of thing. They didn't make it a top priority as far as what they did or who they were as a church. And they certainly didn't teach me to judge and condemn others based on this issue. But I would say that the depth of my understanding of all this changed the greatest when my sister, who I'm very close to, came out to me that she was a lesbian and was in a relationship. And I remember the discussion. She cried all throughout it. It was very heavy. And I could see her fear. I could see how afraid she was, afraid of what mom and dad would think because they didn't know, afraid of what church people would think because she was involved, and afraid of what I would think. And I think that's the part that was heaviest for me, that my sister would be afraid of me and afraid that something like this would ruin our relationship. She said she had known this about herself for a long time, and all the while that she's known this, she has grown and maintained a solid reputation for being incredibly kind and incredibly generous, for being a great listener, for being an excellent role model and leader at youth camps, for having great faith, and for serving people willingly and well. That's what people knew her for. And so I wondered why she would be scared. How could simply sharing this piece of old knowledge, because it was nothing new, she's been this way all along, how could simply sharing this piece of old knowledge possibly change any of that? And she said she had tried to fight it, kind of took on the mentality of fake it till you make it. She dated men, and I didn't realize it at the time, but she was trying to not be homosexual. She was trying to be a normal heterosexual. But she said every time it felt unnatural, and it felt uncomfortable, and it felt forced. Ultimately, it felt wrong, and it felt like she was trying to be someone else. And I saw her battle with the guilt that comes from leading guys on. These guys that she would date, she would recognize how unfair it was to them when they would grow attached to her. Did I mention how kind-hearted she was? To be mindful of such things. So fast forward a few years, I take a new pastoral position across the state, and so I'm moving to her city, and she and her partner actually take me in, and I live with them. And so living together, I spent a lot of time with them, and I got to see some dynamics of their relationship that not many other people get to see. I got to see their relationship a lot closer than many others. And you know what I didn't find? A relationship rooted in sin. No. The kind of hurt and damage that you find in sinful, broken relationships, absent. Theirs didn't have any of that. On the contrary, what I did witness and what I did find was a relationship that gave them life, that gave them nourishment, that gave them fulfillment, a relationship rooted in generous, selfless love for the other, the kind of love that's admirable and inspirational. I was just happy that my sister had found a partner who had similar faith and values. She was CP herself, so she was involved in church and knew our denomination, knew our church. She found a partner who respects her and values her and uplifts her and encourages her and cares for her and loves her. She was in a relationship that made her feel loved and comfortable. It's the kind of relationship that I think we all hope for ourselves to experience and to maintain. So when they decided they wanted to get married, it was easy to celebrate. When you see that kind of loving relationship between two people, how do you not want that to be made more permanent in marriage? And so now they're happily married, and they have a 2-year-old daughter that they're raising in our church. I remember when my sister asked me if I would baptize their daughter, I got to. But part of that conversation, I remember she asked me if I thought that she and her wife would both be able to stand up front for the baptism of their daughter. They had to wonder if the church would celebrate this moment with them, or if the church did, how much. And I grieve that. I grieve that they have to wonder that. I think for homosexuals in the church, I think that's probably a regular, normal thing for them to have to wonder if the church will celebrate good, big moments in their lives. And I grieve that. I hate that. That's not the way it should be. People didn't have to wonder that kind of thing with Jesus. I think we need to be more mindful as a church of our words and our actions, of the way that we talk about groups of people, the way that we treat groups of people. We're called to dispense God's grace to people. I think we need to be mindful of how well we do that or how poorly we do that when we choose to withhold it for people. We need to be mindful of this and to practice self-awareness in all of our interactions with all people, but especially those deemed different, because that's something that Jesus, he does that time and time again in his life and ministry. Scripture gives us his teachings. It also gives us a solid sense of his demeanor and his nature and his grace with people. And we see how he approaches them and how he handles them, especially those deemed different. His love it doesn't need explanation. His love is not cryptic. It doesn't take mental gymnastics and twisting to figure it out and make sense of it. No, his love is clear, and it's reassuring, and it's easy, and it's steady. Now, are all homosexual relationships wholesome and worthy of pride? No, I'm not saying that. Can they be sinful? Can they be damaging? Absolutely. But it's in the exact same way that heterosexual relationships can be sinful and damaging as well. So just as we can celebrate heterosexual relationships and unions for being life-giving, for being nourishing, for producing good fruit, it's just as possible, friends, to celebrate homosexual relationships and unions for the exact same thing, for being life-giving and nourishing and producing good fruit. And I say that because I'm a witness to it. So when you want me to condemn homosexuality across the board for always being evil, for always being wrong, for always being sinful, I have to disagree with you. I have to, because I'm a witness to the contrary. I'm a witness to my sister's homosexual marriage that is nourishing and life-giving, and that does produce good fruit. The fruits of the Spirit even, against which Scripture tells us there is no God-given rule or law. So what a disappointment it is to me, what an utter shame it is to me, when the church wants to create a law, when the church wants to make this sweeping law condemning a group of people for being in certain relationships, relationships in which the kind of love that God desires for humans can still be experienced and practiced. Relationships that have the fruits of the Spirit in them. We can't call that evil. No, the fruits of the Spirit aren't produced in evil circumstances, in wrong relationships. No. So anyway, that's my story as an ally. I welcome further conversation. If you want to talk to me more about it, anytime, I welcome it. But that's my story as to how I became an ally.